Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing so far today? All good? Still a little bit sleepy, that's fair. I think we're all still a little bit sleepy as well from last night, right?
Sleepy, yeah.
Sleepy. We'll take it as sleepy. Thank you for our amazing introduction. I've never been called the amazing AJ King before, so I'm going to take that one. I'm going to bank that one. Feels like either a superhero name or maybe like a bad Vegas magician, so you can decide at the end. You can put that in the feedback. Cool. I guess we'll get started. The clock's already counting down. So welcome to our panel on managing data, getting research applied. So essentially, what we're going to talk about today is not ending up in the situation where we're collecting data for data's sake, and then we're not actually doing anything with it. So as previously introed, I'm AJ. I'm a UX researcher at Ocado Group. So we build an end-to-end grocery logistics platform to get supermarkets around the world online and into an e-commerce space. And I guess we start at that end with you, Monique.
Hi, my name is Monique. I work in the data science space at a company called Trustpilot. So where users can share their shopping experience and also business can learn from reviews to improve their products and service. I work in a team, embedded team, focused on products. My mission is to build data products, help stakeholders in their decision making, and so improving experience for business and users. That's just a minute.
Thank you. So my name is Romina. I work at SMG, which is the Swiss marketplace group. I think you can hear me maybe a bit too loud. I work as a product designer. We work in financial products, so we do a lot of very technical research there. And it's a very nice experience. It's a recently formed company, and it's quite large, so things are getting a bit complex there as well. AJ?
Cool. So my name's Ashley May. I'm a lead UX designer at Trainline. For those of you that don't know, Trainline is we're the world's leading independent rail booking platform. So our mission is to drive sustainable travel by making it easier for customers to book and search for tickets. We're purely rail and coach only because that's kind of part of our core tenet in the mission is to kind of drive sustainable travel. And I head up the lifetime value team within the products team at Trainline.
Amazing. Welcome, everyone. So what we're going to start with talking about today is obviously in all our different functions, data science, product design, UX research, we're all collecting data regularly on a daily basis. Data is coming in. We're kind of inundated with it. Interested in knowing how you go about storing that data. So what is like step one for you? Where does it go once it arrives with you? Maybe we'll start this way down the line, so Ashley.
Thank you. So at Trainline, we get numerous different sources of data. So obviously we've got government transport data, which is it's given freely. It's not sensitive. It's kind of related to transit and transport. We also have market-based customer research, so we're kind of active in Europe and the UK primarily. And then we have our customer research team who are kind of seated within our UX team, basically. So we have, within our UX team, we've got UX designers, researchers, and localization and content UX writers. And the goal of that is obviously to make sure that we've got the right voice for the right market, and that we're conducting the right research. And to that end, we kind of have various types of research that we get, so whether it's kind of diary studies or primary research by holding workshops, which we're able to do again, or if it's online, using tools like user testing to be able to gather those things. We store those in a research repo, which for us is using Confluence Wiki, essentially. And the purpose of that is to enable us to make sure that the research is visible throughout the developmental process. So Jira tickets can be linked back to the research for context, and it enables the research team to be able to aggregate all the research and visualize it for the people that need to see it.
Nice.
Okay. So that's pretty straightforward, and I think it's quite similar for us as well. We have a lot of sales data coming in. We have the product teams that work together with researchers to generate their primary research. We have a marketing team that also works on their own to do a separate, let's say, side of the research. Recently, we started collecting all of that in Notion. And we're going to see how that works, because it's not always super straightforward. Before that, we used to do a lot of presentations from the research team, sharing insights and conclusions, which I always thought was super useful, and it's something that I enjoy a lot. I think in our case, because we have quite small teams, it's easy to share the data across the teams and to make sure that the conclusions reach as many of the people in the different departments as possible. For me, it's always a focus to try to bring as many people on board into the information that we have. So I'm very humanistic about this. I think it's important that people gain an interest into the research or into the data that we have at our disposal, that they understand why it's valuable, why we even go through the trouble of collecting and drawing conclusions out of that data. And I think that once they're involved, like even the sales team and everyone else can understand that there's a reason why we have them collecting data, why we need it done a certain way. There's a reason why we are going out there and interviewing users, and even everyone from the CPO or CEO should see the value of that. So for me, we have all of these tools, and we have all of the documents, and we have all of the presentations, but at the end of the day, it's about building bridges between these teams and making sure that they all understand the value of what's in front of them. That's what I find to be most helpful for us.
Yeah, I guess for the data science, it is a bit different. I think the data, as we understand, is, I would say, the raw data, and once we run analysis and we do our research, that transforms into insights. And, well, in terms of this raw data, as a review platform, of course, we have different sources. We have the reviews itself, we have user engagement points, and so on. So depending what we are, our focus area and the output, we store that. Also documenting, as Ashley mentioned, in Confluence pages, for example, where it's accessible to everyone. I guess for data science, it involves also a little bit of code. It is important to have that also documented in a repo, so we are able to reproduce that insights if we need to. Yeah, I think how we share with others, it really depends on the stakeholder. So what is our audience, and if that's a technical, non-technical. So usually we also have the Confluence that's slightly less technical than, of course, the code itself. That's the repository, but we also have presentations, and depending if that's insights coming from live data, we also have dashboards. That allow us to monitor also these insights across time. So I guess it depends on the audience, but usually, yeah, it's a kind of very standard ways. I think the codes and the Confluence pages and the dashboards.
Yeah, I love that, I guess, and I assume that resonates with most people in the room. You've got sort of passive sources, so the things we put on Confluence, the things that sort of sit there, and then we've got our more active, we do presentations, we put that human face on it, we come and bring our insights kind of to the wider group. Thinking for now about the sort of more passive side, I mean, we're in a room, it's filled with books, right? How do you, with so much content in a passive state, how do you make that available to people in your organization, and how do you sort of get them access to that to know kind of what's around? I don't mind who starts. Go ahead, Ashley.
I can share our learnings, I guess. So I think for us, one of the big changes, I guess for everybody, the global pandemic, was COVID. And you went from having the ability to all be in the room and give these kind of wonderful and enriching research presentations to onboarding new joiners, and perhaps their entire time with you is spent remotely and you never meet in person. And I think it was daunting. I can imagine it was daunting as a new recruit. And as a team, we felt that we needed to kind of scale up our design ops and our onboarding. And to that end, it kind of brought us a side benefit of the goal being to create like an onboarding package for new joiners. So when the new team cohort joins, they know which department they're going to be working in. And for us, we've kind of cherry-picked all of the existing research for them, surfaced so that they can kind of go through what's already been gleaned. They can look at the insights that are current in the market. And crucially, we gave them the time when they joined us to be able to digest all of this. I mean, it's not just a bag with, a water bottle and some socks. It was a useful repository, basically, that they can kind of call on. So that when they do get started, and our role was essentially nothing shipped in the first couple of weeks. We want you to be on board and we want you to learn. They can hit the ground running with a much better idea of what the research has already given us. And kind of furthermore to the discussion that was going on yesterday, Mike Green was holding a forum on communicating research. One of the points made, I think, was from a developer, was how do we make this stuff more visible? How do I see it and what can I do with it? And Monique talked about dashboards, and everybody agreed that was a really great visual way of being able to digest the research. One of the nice things I learned from a previous conference, and I've thought about it, it was a guy named Martin Redding. He used to be the chief product officer at Virgin Atlantic. He introduced this idea of a research museum, which does feel quite suitable given the space we're in. And it was this kind of concept of creating a pop-up within your organization in a high traffic area, like the main reception or something, literally having a roller banner and just setting up and making visual the research that you've got from a recent case study. I have to say, we've kind of got things like customer lifetime journeys on the wall and stuff. We haven't gone as far as a research museum, but I love the idea of it because it brings that happenstance into it, that you can see the research and new eyes can see it and understand it in ways that they might not have done before.
I think actually, before we move on, what I love about that, and I've kind of not contemplated before, having research and data sort of thrown at people at onboarding. So you're sort of saying maybe you don't do the whole research museum thing as, Virgin Atlantic maybe do, but actually the idea that was in a high foot traffic area, onboarding is one of the highest foot traffic areas of the business, right? So I think that's great that you kind of get it in there, get it in early, and then kind of build a culture that's based around always looking at data.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
Absolutely, and like I say, the crucial factor in that is time. We don't want you to be shipping within the first week. It's great when you do, but it's much better to have an underpinning of some useful research data that you can kind of build on.
That's great. Romina, Monique, anything to?
I think that's cool. We had one of those walls that we built right before COVID started. It worked until it didn't, until everyone couldn't see it anymore, and then it stopped working. So I think if you're in a very well-structured theme and you have access to all of those repositories and they're well put together, that's wonderful. However, you may find that you work in a company that doesn't have that, which I've done a lot. So what happens when you don't have all of that stuff, when the research isn't structured and you have people being onboarded who don't know what's available and there isn't always someone there to tell them? I encourage people to be like the advocates of research. Like, you can be the person who loves research in your team. You can be the one who introduces people who are being onboarded to that kind of stuff. You can organize your own sharing sessions and be the person who wants to speak about a certain topic that has been researched in the past. And when people are being onboarded, be the one who transmits that information further, because I think people are much more likely to remember it if you address it like that and to take it seriously than if you just share, in our case, what may be an unstructured document or something that doesn't provide you with a lot of clarity. And then if it's person to person, even if it's online, people get to ask you questions and they get to get more involved into that. So for me, it's like taking the passive research and trying to turn it into active research or something that's still alive in people's minds. I think that could be really helpful, at least if you're working in a company that's not as structured as Ashley's.
No, I think that's wonderful. And as humans, we transfer so much knowledge through storytelling that actually taking something passive and moving it into active will engender a level of engagement with it that maybe the passive doesn't get of it?
Yeah, I think that's a quite tricky question, how to make it available and everyone aware without you manually alerting people, hey, we have that, be aware of that. I think there are a few components of that. As I actually mentioned, the onboarding part, I think it is not drowning people with data, but it's, okay, this is how you can find things. And the how, I think it is maybe the challenge in most places, if you don't have a standardized way to organize, to find things, content research, then I think it is more difficult. But also, I think it is the mindset. I think it's kind of like to think about the lazy approach. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Don't try to do all the research again. Let's see if that exists first. So either looking to conference pages, a quick search actually can save you a lot of time. And asking people, and again, I think it is it is not so enjoyable, but it's necessary. Documentation. Documentation is really important, and documenting everything. It is actually saves a lot of your time, because you can basically replace some meetings. Just, hey, check out this documentation first. If you have some follow-up questions, then we can discuss. And from my experience, that helps quite a lot.
Yeah. When you say you get lots of questions, and then you say, hey, go and check this out, how much of your time as someone who's, you're senior in your company, you know where all the data is? I know that I end up having this a lot. People come and go, hey, where's this piece of data? How often are you sort of batting away people? How much of your time is spent going, go look over here, go look over here?
Yeah, I think it's also an opportunity to train people. Hey, we have this space. You can search, especially for they are new. I think it is important to spend more time. But also sharing sometimes a link, it's, I think it's still better than having a whole meeting to explain what isn't there.
Yeah. Makes sense. We can put a slash and then write signpost after our job title as well, for quite a lot of the time, right? On that, when we signpost people towards data that currently exists, data in previous research, to your point, Monique, let's not reinvent the wheel. If we've done this research, why would we go and do it again? Let's save time, let's go back to it. How, if at all, do you kind of label up data so that we know that it's still fresh? How do you deal with data decay in your organization? So when you signpost someone towards it, you're confident that that piece of data is still relevant, as opposed to something that's expired and we need to do new research.
Yeah, I can start. Try to start answering that. I think as part of documentation is quite important for you to list your assumptions and time frame and considerations. I think it is kind of core of, okay, what needs to be in your documentation. And so your assumptions about the data, your time frame, and your considerations about that in the future. I think that's, I would start with that, but I'll just pass because I'm curious also to see what others have to say.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I think, first of all, if we're learning from proper research, right, we label everything in the sense that we write what the context of the research was, what exactly were we trying to find out, when did that happen, and we put in all of our hypotheses and all of the things that we had in our mind when we started looking into that, right? And I think that just provides you with the context to figure out whether that still applies, whether that's still the case, right? I think most of the time in our case, the people who are actually doing the research or were involved during the research are the ones who know if things still apply. I can't say that there's a universal tagging system where everyone can say, hey, this is right now still valid or it will expire in 3 months. Would be lovely to do that, maybe like that, but it's not the case. So their context really helps you a lot. What exactly was being studied and where and why and what were we trying to find out? Is that still something that we care about? Does that context still exist? And then from that, you go on to figuring out whether that information is still valid, whether you should still take it into consideration. But labeling as such, I can't say that I've done that or seen it done very well.
Yeah, I guess it's tricky, isn't it? And like all qualitative research, there's no right answer for how to do things and where it goes. On that point then, Romina, if the answer is, well, this is fine, whoever's written this documentation up, I'll go talk to them and get some context from them. On the flip side of data decay, what about like churn and people decay? You've spoken about people being really important in transferring data. What happens when those people that have the context, to Alex's point, get pinched by someone else? What do you do in that case?
They left, right?
Yeah.
I think that's one of the hardest things, right? Because when those people who are the repository of knowledge for your company are leaving, then that can actually be a considerable loss, and it can be very hard to get around that. You can do all the documentation you want. If the person who was there and actually cared about that stuff isn't there anymore, no one's going to remember exactly what they tagged, where did they put it, what were they looking into, what were their interests. And that's why I think this kind of like having the research team share their knowledge with as many people as possible is important. Because if more people in your company understand the value of that, if they become more invested in it, they will still remember that they got something out of that maybe 3 months on. And when someone else comes on board, they will still be able to say, hey, don't maybe go and start doing this all over again because our previous researcher or whoever was taking care of this looked into this, right? But I think this information in people's minds, which is hard to keep because we all have too many things to remember, is for us at least invaluable. Like no documents can replace us. You can always create like a repository of, hey, these are like the most important things that we think you should still take into consideration and care about when someone else takes over for me, let's say, right? A researcher or someone in charge can do that. But you still need to always have, I think, this person in there who is the one who really, truly cares about what's being researched.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I put in my talk, which was recorded, that humans by nature are kind of squashy and a bit weird, and that our processes often end up being the same, obviously. You know, we're not saying we're the weakest link because it's all human, it's all, engagement, and it's all, we need researchers who are skilled and able to kind of ask the questions and surface the research. But it's, for us, I think it goes back again to that idea of good housekeeping, of data and of documents and leaving things better than you found them. I think it's the likelihood that you're going to see something through, depending on if it's a multi-year piece of research, is potentially slim. So that it's a really useful thing, whether it's kind of creating design documents or organizing research repositories, to leave it better than you found it, and leave it in a way that somebody who's new to the company can absorb it. It's another COVID learning, I guess, but that's one thing that we found that's really benefited us.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. So, Romina, you're there. You're like, let's get the people to do it. Let's stand on our soapbox, megaphone our way through, tell everyone about the research. Actually, you're like, they're going to leave. Let's put it down in documentation. Monique, sitting on the end as a data scientist whose data is fresh and in dashboards and comes in cleanly on time. I envy you greatly as a qualitative researcher. Where do you think you fit? Like, are you more team Romina or team Ashley on this one?
Well, I think it's hard to say. I think that also depends on each stage we are. And we're in the stage that we are in the research and answering questions. I think it's also a different approach to that. I think there is no answer all fits all. But I think it's more in the early stages. I think it is important, a mix of documentation and also communication there, initially.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, right? A really good product answer as well. Like, it depends. It depends is like our go-to answer for everything, right?
I mean, documentation also takes time. You can spend that time documented, or you can spend it sharing.
Yeah, that is true. So, Romina, when you're there and you want to head out and you want to share your data and everything with it, what is your kind of go-to way to engage and make sure that research is applied, as opposed to you've just had a chat about it? How do you What is your action to make sure that data is used rather than just sits on a shelf or passively listened to?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends who your decision makers are and who you need to get involved into that process, right? I have on occasion had our CPOs help conduct research, because then they really get interested in it. Like if you have a CPO do an interview with a user, they suddenly start seeing, oh wait, this really makes sense now. We should do it. We should definitely do it, you know? So I go a little bit lateral about this, to be honest. It's not just one straightforward way. I think you can have a lot of good research in there and have the decision makers in your company just ignore it because they don't see the value in it. And for me, that's the saddest thing. So if you're lucky enough to be in a company where the conclusions of your research are followed through and respected and they are taken seriously, that's wonderful. But if you're not, just understand who those people are who are going to make a decision about your data and about how to apply it, and try to get them on board.
Nice.
I mean, you know what you were thinking when you did that research. You know what you were trying to figure out. It's just a matter of getting that point across to them.
Yeah, 100%. So actually, Romina makes a great point. Documentation takes time. How do you, when we've got a million competing priorities, how do you tie that into the workflow that you have to do?
I think for us, it goes back to the structure of the team. The fact that we have an integrated research team that we kind of liaise with daily. It feels a lot more collaborative in terms of surfacing, what needs to be shared. It's not the researcher's role to be kind of a filter in the process. The idea is that it could be me conducting an interview, or it could be them. I think it's a fantastic thing culturally. The idea of getting people out of their kind of core roles. And it's another thing we were discussing yesterday. It's that the idea of when you are in a smaller scale company and there's no research resource, there's obviously ethics that come into play in terms of conducting research, but doing something, I think showing the willfulness is better than doing nothing. And whether it's a small scale product or a startup or even an internal product, somebody was talking about internal tools yesterday, and that you don't have a customer-facing product, so how do you kind of recruit an audience? That's kind of a perfect test bed for something like that. If for example, I used to work on the internal customer services tool at Trainline, and it was great because you had telephone call data, you had NPS scores with post-call questionnaires. But we weren't doing customer or end-user research. And we just decided that we can do this. This is something we can do. So we kind of recruited our customer service reps in Edinburgh. We had remote calls before remote calls were thing with our team at Chitic in India. And we set up sessions, and we observed how they used things. And it was much more guerrilla and kind of scrappy and probably not formal research and done by the books, but it's that idea of, I think, something is better than nothing. Willfulness is better than inaction, and everybody at the end, whether it's in the product team or outside, was much more on board with the outcomes.
Yeah, and I love that phrase. It's a little bit scrappy, but action is better than inaction in this kind of thing. Yeah, I kind of agree. And I don't know about how your sort of work comes across or how you get thrown problems to solve, but in a lot of cases, someone will come to us with something to ask about. And so we already, I guess, have buy-in. And then the way we bring people on the journey is essentially, did we give you more confidence, right? Does our data give you more confidence? And ultimately, that's the final question I'll always ask at the end of a project, right? With what we presented you, are you more confident to make the decisions you have to go and make that I don't have to make? It's on you. So did we get you to where you needed to be? I kind of like that.
I guess for that point, when I think on the use cases, right, how keeping research alive, I think it's also the use cases, if that's to support some decision making, then it's okay, then it's there. And also on the documentation part that you mentioned, and how long you should spend, I think it's, I guess a lot of people struggle with that. But I guess a good rule of thumb is proportion to the time you spend to do the research. Really, don't spend more time documenting it from the time that you actually put it in the research. And yeah, so that helps you on the level of details when you're doing things.
Makes sense. Romina, I just want to jump on, as a final point, what you were talking about bringing people along sort of for the ride. I know a few other people have spoken about it over the last couple of days. What are your tactics to get people engaged? Because I guess we're talking about getting research applied. We started thinking at the end of the process, like we've collated all of the data. How does someone now engage with it? But to your point, that's almost too late, right? How do we engage with them as that data collection is happening? What are your tactics?
I mean, if you have good relationships with the people in the various silos and departments, then it shouldn't be maybe too hard to bring them on board. So probably there's like even a step before that where you have to build these relationships so that people have the confidence to actually go out there with you and do something that for them is maybe not comfortable. Of course, people like in the sales team, they talk to users all the time, but they might not talk in a way that yields data that's maybe really useful to you, right? But then you have a lot of other disciplines and a lot of people in your company that never talk to users. They never interact with someone on the other side of the wall, right? And they just have to do that for the first time. And if they don't trust you, I don't think it's very easy to get them to do that. So first of all, you have to build those relationships. And then I guess you can be like, if you're really cheeky about it, you can build in all sorts of like other things from like our biases in research talk. There's some sunk cost effect in there. I invested some time into gathering this data. Now I want to actually see what happens with it. You can take advantage of some small things there as well, I think. I'm being cheeky, I know. But
no, I love that. Just turning around to the stakeholder and being like, you've already paid for it. Do you want to read it or do you want to leave it on the shelf? That's great, right? That's brilliant. Monique, where you're collecting data from systems as a data scientist, how do you bring people into the journey earlier on?
Yeah, I guess also that's how I approach in my talk. Working embedded in teams is quite important. So from early stages, working with UX and either helping or trying to answer some of the questions through data, I think it is quite important. And it's also nice because I think when you come from a technical background, you put yourself in other people's shoes and try to think how they think. And that's a really good exercise, actually. So it avoids you to lose yourself in the research, and I think that's working cross-functional teams. I think it is quite helpful, but also don't spend too much time. As soon as you have some findings, go out there, share. Because if you spend some time maybe in the wrong direction, and then someone can actually, no, we're not actually looking at that. So it helps you to focus on the right things. So either PMs or developers, everyone really, at this stage, especially in the early stage, everyone you can talk to is, I think, helps you.
Yeah, and that's really great. And you're right, like the second you have something to share, we should always be sharing it, right? We're not a vault. It's not data for us to kind of keep. It is there to help us make decisions and move things forward in our product thinking. I also really liked what you mentioned about trying to get into the mindset of, like, I always try and treat a stakeholder as a user themselves. Like, what are they needing from me as the product of research? What is that product, and how will they engage with the data? Because again, at the end of it, it's not data for my sake, right? It's data for something else. Right. So actually, you were saying about onboarding. So I guess, Monique brings everyone along for the ride. Romina's turning around and saying, hey, come along, watch some sessions. You're right at the beginning of the process. Like, they've just entered the company onboarding-wise, and you're already throwing research at them. Practically, how does that conversation kind of work within everything else in onboarding for you?
I mean, not as a new joiner, but as one of the people that absorbs the research, I may take part, but is also, the person who says, how do I know what I need to know? I'm the person who speaks with the researcher and wants to glean that. And then the relationship then is that, making use of the researcher's expertise to be able to kind of get the insights. but that kind of lends itself to our team structure, I think, is that it's collaborative, but it's, using inductive reasoning with the research team to essentially say we're not looking to come up with a solution, we're just looking to develop an outcome. So making sure that it's not a closed-minded goal to just kind of, is it a go, no-go thing that we're just testing, but to, to better understand what that outcome's going to be. And then it's, once we have the research and the insights, it's all our jobs to kind of shape that and create the product that solves the problem.
Amazing. We have a few minutes left if anyone in the audience has any questions for our lovely panel. Yeah, someone down at the front here. Cheers.
Cool. I know that one new topic in the industry that's coming up recently is like democratization of user research and empowering teams to conduct research, because I think in reality you may not have a researcher available to participate in everything you do. Can you guys speak to how you see the democratization of user research across your teams when you involve a researcher, and how you equip teams to do their own research?
Nice. Do you have anyone in particular you'd like to ask that to, or should we just go down the line?
Just who wants to answer, yeah.
Yeah, so in our case, we had at some point limited resources for research, right? I've worked in teams where we just didn't have enough time for the researchers to participate on everything or take their time to really be involved with everything. So we did kind of like small boot camps with them, where we went through like different types of research, and they actually taught some members of our team how they should do that better, how they should structure documents for their research before going in, during the actual research, what's the process. We did kind of like a boot camp of research. And then I guess in that sense you can say that we kind of got all leveled up in a sense with them together, which just enables you to have more resources to go to than when you need to do research and you need to do it in the individual teams. You have more people to go to. They can always check back in with the actual proper researchers and make sure that they're doing things right and they're understanding the conclusions right, because I feel a lot of the time that can get lost. But it seems like less of a cost then, or like less of an effort. You don't have to maybe have like a huge team of researchers if the researchers that you have on board are actually able to train up a little bit the teams around them. So it's a lower cost in the end for us to do it like that.
I'd say further to the point on cost, we were discussing last night about the kind of the inordinate price of some of the research tools that are available, and that's kind of another aspect of democratization, I guess, is the idea of like the scale of the company being shut out of being able to do certain types of research by the limitations of their budgets. I think tooling plays a big part in that. One of the key themes is kind of making use of what you've got. I think we found, whether it's a Google spreadsheet or slides. I'm not suggesting we present back spreadsheets. But just as a tool for kind of gathering data, the idea of making tools that are available to everybody is I think, an important one. So that there's not an exclusivity to the process of research.
Monique, there's 40 on the clock.
Okay,
you want to go for it?
Quick. Yeah, I think taking advantage of tools for sure. It saves quite a lot of time. I think coordination across teams as well, in terms of if you're lacking resources. But also if the goal is not proportional to the resources, then I think it's also worth to let's think what we're trying to achieve, because then we're not compatible. So it's a short answer. I hope that complements that.
Yeah. And from our side, similar to Romina, our PMs are very hungry for this sort of stuff, so we'll run similar sorts of boot camps, asking good questions and going from there. And that is time, everyone. So please give a huge round of applause to our lovely panelists.